brothers and sisters in Jesus Christ. I begin the second day of our Lenten retreat with a beautiful poetic verses from the novel, namely, Ether into the Nemesis by L.J. Vanier. Can read that beautiful verses. See that. I'll read it. If we never experience the chill of a dark winter, it is very unlikely that we will ever cherish the warmth of a bright summer's day. In order to complete our amazing life journey successfully, it is vital that we turn each and every dark tear into a pearl of wisdom and find the blessing in every curse. Upon the dark road you are traveling, you have no fear. Take the darkness as your comfort, because you are the light shining in the dark. You just need to find the spark. Okay, good. Oh, again coming here. So, from this quotation, of course, has got strong reference to the theme of today. You know, I already explained that. The dark night of the soul. Somebody asked me last, Father, you are going to something negative, some diabolic, something against the Catholic faith. No. It's particularly and anciently Catholic and old Christian, what is called the mystical and monastic theology from whole Christian tradition. The dark night of the soul is one of the most important subjects I used to teach seminary students and others. Only seminary and others. Sometimes I never spoke like this audience. Very few Christians understand it or how to deal with the experience when they have it. Sometimes we don't know, really, is it a dark night to the soul? Have you gone through a period of spiritual dryness or a darkness when God seemed far away? Probably you have. I had, of course. If not, at some point you are likely to experience this. Now onwards, after this talk, you will see that something is there or something I experienced in my past life, or we will get a chance to experience once. The Dark Night, the title of the poem and treatise on prayer, was written between 1578 to 85 by St. John of the Cross, the great Spanish Carmelite saint, mystic and poet and philosopher, philanthropist, so many names can called. I visited that place where he lived in south of Spain, Andalusia, and even Madrid, all these beautiful places, and even near to Salamanca and Avila. The poem contemplates his treatise, The Ascent of Mount Carmel. The Ascent of Mount Carmel. Mount Carmel, not in Spain. You know, it is in the Jerusalem. In which the soul learns how God, by pulling up and rooting out his or her vices. Whereas vices puff up the ego, the love of God scores the ego clean. The term dark night comes from the Spanish phrase noche oscura. There are some Spanish words, noche oscura. The English word dark being more literally translated obscure. There is now an obscurity between the believer and God. It is because of the great mystery of God, something is there always to understand. Because of that is why we have the revelation, the history, the greatest revelation in Jesus Christ. I used to speak in Epiphany, so many epiphanies of this season of Christmas. No? I told about Epiphany Before Epiphany, Jesus' birth is an epiphany. Then the baptism is epiphany. The kings came, that was an epiphany. And then again, Jesus was revealed in the temple. That was an epiphany. So epiphany is the revelation. And from obscurity to revealed, the great mystery. The dark night is a metaphor describing the mystical union between the soul and God. In this dark night, the soul is detached from that all that is not God, undergoes privation of light, but remains on the road to darkness because it will lead to the light. We all know the life and works of Mother Teresa of Calcutta. I had the privilege, or humbly I accept that I could meet her 3 times in my life. See. And also another saint also living, John Paul II. Also 4 or 5 times I met him, even in his room over the John Paul II. So I'm privileged that way, because I was a student in India. She visited our seminary, and we had a church program. She came there, and even I visited in her house. She was there, and we spoke with her. That I already, once I said about that. Such a great, wonderful experience. I always enrich in my heart to meet such a great person of Mother Teresa. So I'm going to speak something about Mother Teresa, how it was there. She is widely known in her lifetime as a living saint. Immediately after her death, published a book about Mother Teresa, namely, Come Be My Light. This book is about the private writings of Mother Teresa. It contains the agonized testimony of a woman who confronted a terrifying period of dark night of the soul. She writes, "In my soul, I feel just that terrible pain of loss, of God not wanting me, of God not being God, of God not existing." It is written by one of the secretaries, one of the priests of the Mother Teresa congregation. He's called a Polish priest. Evidence of her dark night started to appear in her correspondence with her spiritual father when she was in her late 30s. Mother Teresa later writes of embracing that darkness. "I can't express in words the gratitude I owe you for your kindness to me. For the first time in years, I have come to love the darkness. For I believe now that it is part of a very, very small part of Jesus' darkness and pain on earth." She writes beautifully. My dear friends, we all experience the storms of our emotions. Feeling frustrated or lost or tired or abandoned. I have this great experience. I'm experienced with other people. When I go to some old age homes, I like to go to the old age homes. Even the priest homes, the old age Vianney homes, there are many other. They used to tell me, "Father, we are abandoned." And they are mostly frustrated. Some priests were very wonderful priests, always happy, always smiling, always joyful. But in the later years, the last years of their life, always going to be more gloomy and feeling abandoned. Yet, we all are more than our feelings. And we can live beyond our own emotions. All but a few of us have felt abandoned by God. All but a few of us have had doubts about God's existence. We study philosophy in our theology faculties and school in India. Also all over the world used to have here 3 years of philosophy. Normally, some of these topics were taught is the atheist philosophers like Nietzsche and all Kafka like Sartre. They are all atheists and they denied God. Even Nietzsche wanted to bury God, to put nail on the coffin of God. But from there we start, from nihilism to atheism and to God. That's our curriculum. Such Catholic fathers should know that what is that feeling of nothingness, what is that feeling of God is not existing or the death of God. There is a theology of death of God. So, it is not unlikely that most Christians today, to some degree or another, feel emotionally abandoned and intellectually doubtful. Mother Teresa is one of the patron saints to those of us who have experienced the darkness of mind and emotion. Every chapel of the convents of missionaries of charity, founded by St. Mother Teresa, has a large crucifix over the altar. See, like that. And above the crucifix are the words, I thirst. I do understand where Mother Teresa found her vocation was subjected to doubt and darkness, and yet knowing someone and somewhere that it is precisely in the poorest of the poor, in the wretched of the world, in those no one cares about, that the darkness makes sense. The cross of Christ, with its infinite suffering, is all that makes sense. Once more. The cross of Christ, with its infinite suffering, is all that makes sense to any kind of darkness. The agony in the garden is not merely the prelude to Good Friday, but is the beginning of the darkness of God. The darkness understood by Abraham about to sacrifice his son Isaac. The darkness understood by Job and trashed by her friends who like the light of faithless reason more than the terrible truths. The terrible darkness that is the cry of Jesus from the cross. That is what drove Mother Teresa. That is what made her thirsty. That is what she knew, that only sacrificial love can understand and in a way accept this darkness and give its meaning. Mother Teresa abandoned not only family and possessions, but even spiritual refreshment in her commitment to give herself entirely to God. She lived her public life loving, smiling and healing, bringing light to the others and darkness. She lived her interior life abandoned, loving, seeking, doubting in the darkness. What we do not know is that she also embraced Jesus' experience of abandonment on the cross. When he cried out in agony, my God, why have you forsaken me? We are going to meditate on this word. And especially in Lenten season, we are going to have more about this word. And during the Holy Week, we will be meditating on this word. This wonderful prayer, we have to meditate every day sometimes. The real meaning of this, my God, why have you forsaken me? Remember, Jesus had his dark night of the soul. Jesus came to earth and experienced a dark night like no other in the history of humankind. And he suffered the worst of it while separated from his Father. The so-called separation. We cannot say, but I will explain that. He suffered this for us. Not so that we would never have to suffer, but so that when we do suffer, we might become more like him. Facing a terror of the cross became Jesus' dark night of the soul in Gethsemane. Says Dr. James Montgomery. Again he writes, we should notice as we do this that not every time is a time of blessing, nor is every place. Jesus had just come from Jerusalem, and that, far from being a place of blessing, was actually a place of persecution. Are there some who have been going through a time of persecution, testing, a dark night of the soul? So did Jesus. The time is coming when night's shadows will pass and day of blessing will dawn. The book of Isaiah from the Old Testament, chapter 53, is one of the most incredible chapters in the Bible. Isaiah chapter 53. It describes Jesus' dark night in a perfect detail, centuries before. The prophet Isaiah foretells us exactly what would happen when the Messiah came. He would be despised, rejected, a man of many sorrows, acquainted with grief, wounded, bruised, oppressed, afflicted, cut off, exactly what Jesus had to endure. In verse 48, Isaiah writes, "Surely he had borne our grief and carried our sorrows, yet we did esteem him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted. But he was wounded for our transgressions. He was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him. And with his stripes we are healed. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned everyone to his own way. And the Lord had laid on him the iniquity of all us. He was taken from the prison and from judgment. For he was cut off out of the land of the living. For the transgression of my people was he stricken." See, this is written by Isaiah centuries before Jesus born. In verse 10, Isaiah's words are absolutely astonishing. "Yet it pleased the Lord to bruise him. He had put him to grief. When thou shalt make his soul an offering for sin." In other words, out of his infinite love for us, God used the way of suffering to accomplish his will, salvation for all mankind. In like manner, God deals with us. He uses the way of suffering to accomplish his will, the sanctification of our body, soul, and spirit. My dear friends, in the Gospel of Matthew and Mark, while Jesus is dying on the cross, he cries out the words, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" These words seem to be an Aramaic rendering of the first verse of Psalm chapter 22, an individual lament psalm ascribed to David. Coming to the patriarchs. Okay. Stories are always good. The David story is always attracting. I used to hundreds of homilies made by on David and Joseph. Scholars describe Jesus' final words as cry of dereliction, cry of judgment, or a cry of final triumph. That's why I told this is very important. The whole universe, the whole humanity. The reality of grief is absence of God. Jesus' laments have universal, particular, and unique significance. As universal, they give voice to common human longing for God's presence and help in the midst of trouble. Jesus wept. Jesus wondered if God had deserted him. Jesus was tortured and condemned at the hands of an unjust political process. Jesus knew pain and betrayal and the sting of death. The witness of gospel suggests that the darkness in which humans often find themselves is not to be dismissed as lack of faith. But according to Jesus' laments, neither does this darkness mean God's abandonment. It seems like that. It's not the abandonment of the Father. The context of Psalm 22 demonstrates that even in the midst of Jesus' feeling of forsakenness by God, he remains the cherished offspring of a loving Father. The question of God's absence in the world has been raised anew in 20th century and 21st centuries with a special urgency. The abandonment, the God's absence, the nothingness, the meaningless, the death of God, in the light of a staggering losses of the Holocaust in Germany. I have visited that place, in Auschwitz. Pope Francis visited there, and he kept silence whole day. I think he spent there without speaking anything. I don't think anybody visited there, at least when you have time, good. And the other parts of the world, genocides, civil wars in Rwanda, Darfur, in Russia, and even in now it's happening, what is happening in the Islamic ISIS land, and the horrific suffering of women and children at the hands of poverty and sexual violence. But the gospel witness rejects any theology that proposes God's abandonment of creation. Elivis, where are you, God? Seeing the pictures and the experience in the Holocaust, he said, there's no God. Even the existential philosophers and theologians, they rejected God. Basically, this kind of cruelty and abandonment. No, it is not that way. It's not God's problem, it's our problem. Instead of interpreting proposes God's abandonment of creation, interpreting Jesus' cry as a genuine abandonment by God, Christ's suffering has also been interpreted as the identification with the oppressed and lowly, and his corresponding liberation of the weak and the downtrodden. Jesus was abandoned. He was crying with the humanity, those who are crying every day. In other words, Jesus was and is a fellow lamenter with all humanity. He's crying with us. He's crying with us. This stretches the definition of the lament out of its particular pattern in Israel's tradition and set it in a wider universal context. As one who sings the strong song of grief and mortality, Jesus joins in with the lament of all humanity across time and cultures. Being abandoned is a fearful state. We hear of parents with a label attached to his or her collar by the child, abandoned at the casualty department of hospitals. I have experienced this in India. You may not know the situations. Wives are abandoned by husbands, and husbands by their wives. The children in vast cities all over the world are abandoned every day in their hundreds, left to live by their wits, scavenging from dustbins and hanging around the backs of supermarkets and fat food shops, sleeping in the sewers where there is some warmth. Finally, they are the poor, abandoned street children. During my theology studies days, I was living nearby Bombay, in Pune. I used to travel to Bombay. I traveled to the slums in Bombay, biggest slums, millions of people living. You never can imagine what kind of situation there. What kind of, now it's better now, but still. So I'm saying that they are the poor, abandoned street children. Left to live by their wits, sleeping the sewers there where some warmth. Finally, they are poor, abandoned street children. Here is Christ in the cross. He is in pain. And it is not merely the pain of the nails, but the enormous grief of the loss of his Father. He had never known what it was to live without his Father's love, but now on the cross he was being forsaken by the one who loves him the most. God had forsaken his son at his greatest hour of need, so that Jesus was utterly alone. I think you understand what I am saying. It's not abandoning of God, the Father. It is identification with the humanity wherever they suffer, wherever they're in abandoned. There is for us no abandonment because Christ has ended our estrangement. In fact, there is perfect reconciliation. I can today look in the great happy face of God in heaven and can say to him, my Father, and he will say to me, my own dear son, I will never leave you nor forsake you. You are too precious to me because the Lamb of God, my son, has made you my own forever. See that? That is the crux of the cross and the cry and the lament and abandonment, what Jesus was suffering. This is the gospel. Jesus forsaken under the judgment of my sins, while I am never forsaken, held daily in the everlasting arms of the warm love of God. Henceforth, I live for him, yet not I. Christ lives in me, and the life which I now live is the faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. My dear friends, this is what we have to experience in our Lenten season. We have to prepare for our Holy Week, to understand the love that Jesus showered upon us. He is always with us. Christ on Calvary has erased the record of my sin. It has been wiped clean. All the guilt has gone. Every spot, every wrinkle, every such thing. It has all vanished away forever and ever. Even the very memory of it has been removed from God himself. Jesus Christ, the Son of God, did a decent and proper job of the work of his Father gave him to do. He was doing that work of his Father. It was not abandonment. He was doing the work of God. He was doing the work of his Father that entrusted him. On the cross, he purged all our sins so that everyone has been erased. I could go on to consider other great personages in the scripture who wrestle with the depression and dark nights of the soul. King David will likely suffice to illustrate how the life is hard won. I already referred that David. Life is not always hard, of course, and Jesus did promise us an abundant, full and meaningful life. John chapter 10, verses 10. A meaningful, abundant and full life. We also need to remember that the Lord restored to David from dark night to the joy of his salvation. Then too, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, and more. Galatians chapter 5, 20 verses 22. So we need not feel we are on our own in getting victory over depression. The Psalms are believed to be written by King David. See, when I was a child, our family used to have every day in the evening, used to read 2-3 Psalms. That was compulsory for us to read before our evening prayer. They were written to teach us that there is hope for the hurting heart, and there is refreshment available for the weary soul. They are not only the story of David, but of you and me and everybody thirst for God. King David, the man after God's own heart, brought on his own dark night of the soul through blatant and willful sin when he committed adultery with Bethsaida, and then gave his soldiers order to see it that her husband would die in battle. David did not confess his sins to the Lord right away, but his delay cost him dearly. Psalm 32, 3-4 probably records David's misery during the time between his sinning and his confessing. The Psalm, and especially Psalm 51, gives further insight into David's feelings when he confessed his sins. Here are some of the symptoms David manifested when he came to grips with his sin. As recorded Psalm 32 and 51, my body wasted away, feeling oppressed by the Lord. The necessity of having his spirit broken and being made to feel contrition. Elsewhere in Psalms, David reveals other emotions which he generally associates with depression. My bones are dismayed, and my soul is greatly dismayed. I am weary with my sighing. Every night I make my bed swim, dissolve my couch with my tears. My eye has wasted away with grief. Why are you downcast, O my soul? Why so disturbed within me? Put your hope in God, for I will yet praise him, my Savior. My soul is downcast with me. Why are you downcast, O my soul? Why so disturbed within me? Put your hope in God, for I will yet praise him, my Savior and my God. Make it as a meditation, please. No simple words will suffice to account of the depth and intensity of his longing for God, though he was a sinner. I am like a deer panting for flowing streams of life-giving water. I am like a deer panting for flowing streams of life-giving water. Oh God, I thirst for you. The longing for the presence of God comes to this psalmist. He uses the language of a deer. This is a man who knows God. But note that this is more. He says, as a deer pants for the flowing streams. What a beautiful metaphor. That word to pant means to long for or to crave. While we have many things, what we crave today. I wonder how many people genuinely, truly, from the bottom of their heart, craving God. I wonder how many people throughout Lenten season crave God. I wonder if we were honest, when we wake in the morning, is the first thing in our mind that we just have to get in God's word, because we desire him in our lives so much. So if you have that experience of David, please follow him through the Psalms as a deer panting for flowing streams of life-giving water. You see, a deer pants after flowing streams because by default, he knows within his ability to find a water source lies his ability to live or to die. That's natural. That's the being of a deer. If he doesn't find the water, he is dead. This is the type of longing the writer expresses he has for God. The deer pants for the water because he is tired, worn out, and in need of refreshing. What a beautiful picture of truth the deer is. He runs to water to find life. He runs to water to quench his deepest needs. He runs to the water for refreshment. Many things will cause us to lose our joy in this life, but only one can restore and give pure joy, and it is our Lord God above. Are you thirsty for God? When you hear this text, do you think about your life and say, oh, how badly do I need a refreshing encounter with my Lord? Notice this distinction here. My soul thirsts for God, the living God. He doesn't want a form of God. He does not want the truth about God. He hungers and thirsts for encounter with God who lives, and there is only one God who lives, and He is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and God of Jacob. He is the God of Moses and Elijah. And the good news is the true and living God is the God of you and me. You like all stories, no? Okay. I used to say stories in my homilies. Sometimes crying stories. This is not crying, it's a normal story. There is a story told of a young student who went to his spiritual teacher and asked the question, Master, how can I truly find God? The teacher asked the student to accompany him to the river, which ran by the village, and invited him to go into the water. When they got into the middle of the stream, the teacher said, Please immerse yourself in the water. The student did as he was instructed, whereupon the teacher put his hands on the young man's head and held him under the water. Presently, the student began to struggle. The master held him under still. A moment passed, and the student was thrashing and beating in the water and air with his arms. Still, the master held him under the water. Finally, the student was released and shot up from the water, lungs aching and gasping for air. The teacher waited for few moments, and then said, When you desire God as truly as you desire to breathe the air, you just breathe. Then you shall find God. Yes, God comes to people in dark clouds, dark nights, dark dreams, and dark strangers in ways that sometimes scare them half to death, but almost always for their good, or at least their renovation. God does some of God's best work in the dark. Thanks be to our God for both darkness and light. We'll take a small pause or small 5 minutes. A small video will be played here, and if you want something to drink or go, it's almost 18:15. It will last for 20 minutes maybe. I can. Okay, so just can relax 5 minutes. Welcome back to the life of the patriarchs. If we read biographies of great Old Testament patriarchs, or the saints and the mystics, almost all of them will take some time they call the dark night of the soul. Remember, the following biblical biographies of some patriarchs are examples of those who experienced the dark night of the soul. I'll explain, then you can see that. I don't have much time. Anyway, I will introduce some of the things I've already prepared because of you want to go. I thought it is 1 hour, maybe 15 minutes extra. Remember, Abraham had night of the soul. In Genesis 15, we find Abraham had an experience of what spiritual directors call the dark night of the soul. Genesis 15:12 reads, Now, when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abraham. And behold, horror and great darkness fell upon him. And as a result, this great man of faith was afraid, uncertain, and frustrated, and asked the Lord why he hadn't sent the son he had promised to him and Sarah. God permits these midnight experiences so that it is dark enough for us to see the stars and quiet enough to hear his voice, reaffirm the promises he has made to us, he says. Also, I'm not explaining the story of he's going to the Moriah where he wants to sacrifice his son. That may be another occasion. Remember another great example, Moses. Moses had a dark experience of the soul. In the book of Exodus 20, Moses approached the dark cloud where God dwells. This is a metaphor for journey into dark of the night where it is impossible to see. Darkness is a symbol for encounter with God who is incomprehensible. Here Moses encounters God in the darkness only to be enlightened by that very same darkness. Put another way, Moses' eternal progress is the movement from human light to divine darkness. The vision of Moses begins in the light, but as he becomes more perfect, he is led by God into the darkness where he is enlightened. This life of prayer and contemplation is represented paradoxically as a journey from light to darkness sometimes. It is only through this maze of darkness that the soul can reach God, who is beyond all intellectual comprehension. To remain in one's own light is to die. To walk through the darkness where God dwells is to live in the light. Gregory of Nyssa, great Cappadocian, one of the Cappadocian fathers, yesterday I referred that. He wrote a beautiful book on the life of Moses. Yeah, the life of Moses, Gregory of Nyssa. It's very, very difficult to understand. Even I read 2 times at least to understand a little bit. Anyway, consider it the crowning work of his mysticism. Gregory utilizes the literal life of Moses to paint a picture of the goals of spiritual life. Climbing the mountain of the knowledge and the love of God, living a life of ever-increasing virtue towards perfection. Becoming a friend of God. The spiritual life can be neither stagnant nor static. As one travels further the higher on the road of virtue, one paradoxically attains an unattainable perfection. The paradox is rooted in the God who is perfect to virtue, yet whose perfect virtue is utterly limitless. Gregory was followed by a great saint called Pseudo-Dionysius the Areopagite. I used to teach him, but always that problem. From Greek, he's a great saint from Antioch. He was a great major, one of the church fathers, who became the major resource for the study of the divine darkness. Beginning with Dionysius, the tradition of the mystical theology puts toward vision of darkness that is different from the nothingness. By an undivided and absolute abandonment of yourself and everything, shedding all and free from all, you will be uplifted to the ray of the divine darkness which is above everything that is. He says, for theologian, darkness is not absence, a void, but rather a brilliant ray of divine darkness, loaded with duplicity. And from there, in the biblical Moses ascent up to Sinai. Pseudo-Dionysius. You can read that. Darkness which above everything is that. He is the famous father of Arya. I like him very much, though the name is difficult to pronounce. Okay. Like my family name, always ask you to me, Father, what is your family? Can you pronounce it? Can you pronounce it? I pronounce it. Still, they all make mistake. No problem. You can ask me. Don't worry. Remember Elijah's dark night of the soul. Elijah's dark night of the soul. It has to take a long time to explain at least a little bit of these things, but I am not just referring. Immediately after a great spiritual victory on Mount Carmel, we read in 1 King, chapter 1, 19, 4-5. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a broom tree. And he prayed that he might die. And he said, "It is enough. Now, Lord, take my life, for I am better than my fathers." One of the hardest things to decide during dark night is whether to surrender or to resist. The choice often comes down to what we believe about God and how God acts, what means that every dark night of the soul involves wrestling with belief. Story of Jacob. Wonderful wrestling with God whole night with a stranger, fighting with a stranger. See that? Oh, it's about a beautiful picture, I think, from Caravaggio or some of the great painters anyway. So who it is? When he wrestles a man in the dark, out of the dark night, a stranger leap and hurls himself at Jacob, and they wrestle with each other all night long. Jacob cannot see the attacker's face in the dark. He never saw that. Who is this person? Cannot see in the face. That is also Moses could not see the face. No, he was a wicked man. He went up to Sinai. He could not see anything. He could only see the back. Anyway, so that way, and then just before dawn, the man touches Jacob's thigh, and Jacob is left crippled and helpless. The stranger had simply held back until the end, letting Jacob think he might win, so that when he was defeated, he would know that he was truly defeated, so that he would know that not all the shrewdness, will, and brute force he could muster were enough to win this. The Bible story tells us that the stranger leaves the place of a resting with a limp. This is a blessing, the gift God gives him. You know who was Jacob? Who was Jacob? See, Jacob, who would go to be the father of the 12 tribes of Israel, has known success and cheated his brother for the birthright of the land God gave to Abraham and Isaac. Instead, the gift, the blessing that God gives us is in the dark and is in our vulnerability is love. Even if God becomes a stranger to us in the dark night of our souls, he does in the end gives us everything. During the dark night of the soul, Jacob discovered that he would spend his life fighting God and wresting his will, and that the only way to victory was through surrender. As a writer, Tozer, said, the Lord cannot fully bless a man until he has first conquered him. God conquered Jacob by weakening him. That's why the whole night struggle, whole night fight. We have to fight sometimes whole night, all life fighting. I know some people fighting with some kind of darkness the whole life. But it is so. We have to accept that. I'm not going to explain Joseph, beautiful story of Joseph. Joseph was also there. I'm just skipping some of the things. Joseph learned discipline in his life, and he was the hand of God always with him, even in his whole life. That was Joseph, no? The father, he left into the whole dreamer, a great dreamer, went into the desert, thrown by brothers into the well, and afterwards he went into Egypt. And the last words is that the providential God, when the brothers came for food in Egypt, when he was a governor there, and they thought he was going to revenge them. And what happened, When Egypt all subject to his word, he could say to his brethren, but as for you, you thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good, to bring to pass, as it is this day, to save much people alive. I want to give you the grain. I want to give you the food. That's why God sent me. God put me in the well. God put me in the desert. God put me in the darkness. The dreams of youth, disciplined by darkness, made it possible for him to perform magnanimously the prerogative of power. Prerogative, how to deal with the power. So another patriarch I would like to deal a little bit more, maybe we'll use 5 minutes and then finish. Okay? Oh. Okay. You know, have you heard about Job? Remember the dark night of Job. The story of Job begins with him enjoying life, surrounded by his family and his wealth, enjoying his reputation for wisdom and godliness. He was loved by God. He was a man with a sign of God on top of his heart. That's what. You know my servant Job, he is unjust, he is against evil. God himself said about Job when you read that Bible verses, first 2-3 chapters, what God says about Job. Never anything about a man in the world spoken by God like Job. So beautifully he says, he is the just, he is against evil, he is and also he has whole life, beautiful life, whole family, children, cattle, camels, sheep, everything. You know what happened? Everything gone. Everything gone. And he's gone to utter helplessness. Utter the loss of children and the property, torturous pain and silence and distance from God. He has worshipped. Distance from the God. From God he has worshipped. So like Jesus, I think Job is a forerunner of Jesus. Like Isaiah wrote, Job was so exactly like Isaiah's. In the end, when God has spoken, Job is silent, speechless in the face of mystery. Who are you to talk to me? Who are you to convert me? God is. You should go, and I already told Job about my homily Sunday. I talk about a little bit about Job. You remember that? Job, no? So Job is one of the beautiful books I like. Nobody knows who wrote it. Some say Solomon or wisdom literature. But whatever we say is not correct. What are the researchers even say, biblical scholars, that nobody knows who wrote that book. It may not be an original character. Somewhere some person lived in an area, was a rich man with 7,000 camels, 5,000 sheep, and 500 pair of calves, and so rich man with 10 children, and all children were immediately gone, dying, all one. Yeah, okay. Anyway, okay. Job chapter 3, 1-3 reads, After this, Job opened his mouth and cursed the day of his birth. See that? Cursed his day of his birth. The story of Job from the Old Testament is incredibly real to understand the experience of a deep suffering and darkness in our life. God put the book of Job right in the center of the Bible for a very good reason. It is an example of faith in the night seasons. Some are frightened to read the book Job. I know some are. No, I don't read Job. But I would suggest you to read. Please go and read. I used to read long verses, and even than Gospels I would go to Job. God intends for all of us to use it as a roadmap on our journey through the dark night, always keeping in mind that at the end of the road, Job finally saw God as he never had seen him before, and it changed his life forever. After my homily Sunday, somebody asked me, Father, what happened, Job? I told him to go and read the Bible. See, then he was given the extra 20 children, 12,000 camels, and 20,000 sheep. Everything given. And he lived 140 years, Job. So that's a maybe story or whatever it is. Anyway, maybe, I don't know. So, life of Job teaches us that there will be no real understanding of life until there is first a Gethsemane and a Calvary in each of our lives. Life includes suffering and darkness. The dark night of the soul is a medium in which we learn about our own suffering. And to learn about suffering is to pursue the essence of our unique presence here in this life. Suffering has its goal and sanctification, the purification of our souls and spirits. Suffering comes about as God unrelentingly identifies the most potentially damaging hindrance to our relationship with Him, and then lovingly begins to strip the thing away from God, from us. He crushes us, He breaks us, He shakes us, and removes everything that is the way of His accomplishing His will and through our lives, our souls. Yeah, that night of the soul is medium to which we learn about our own suffering, and to learn our suffering is to pursue the essence of our unique presence here in this life. Suffer has as its goal the sanctification and purification of our souls. So I thought it is up to think about in Lenten season, because of the suffering of Jesus. We are going to enter into the great season of Lent, and so. Some important points to remember when we are going through suffering are. Go to the papers just now. Little up. Okay. God allows our troubles to drive us to our knees and to bring us back to Himself. God allows trials in our lives so we may turn around and minister to others in a similar circumstances. 2 Corinthians chapter 1, 3-4. Sometimes our troubles must get worse before freedom comes. Satan obviously does not want that. Therefore, he does everything he possibly can to stop to it. Satan's work, you should go to Job, 2-3 chapters, how he entered into heaven and speaking with the meeting between God and angels, and he's sitting there and God asking him all this, where are you going, what is happening, how do you visit Job in here? So Satan is always everywhere there. Believe that, obviously not that, therefore everything not he possibly can to stop our life. It's important to realize that we cannot get ourselves out of trouble. If God has allowed the trial, then he is the only one who can get us out of it. Therefore, it is not our battle, but God's battle. That's what God always watched. Till the end of the soul of the Job, he watched it. Whatever, do it. There are a lot of philosophical things are there, but I not explain all these things about that. It's focus on God, innovating activity upon the soul, destined for transformation. The soul remains in spiritual darkness, passive, yet docile, and responsive to divine touch. By contrast, the dark night of the soul focuses on the individual self and one's particular trial that causes sadness, agitation, turmoil, or distress in one's life. It has one-dimensional perspective, the self. Okay. So again, I have some of the great masters and dark night, like St. Augustine. You know Augustine, the Confessions of Augustine. You know, I referred sometimes. Augustine is one of the, after the Job, Augustine of Hippo. See that, the Confessions. I would suggest to you all. I won't suggest the first book I mentioned, but this is at least if you wanted to have a deep understanding of what is the Christian life, what's the meaning of life, what we are craving for, what is our life, it has what the meaning, go and read Confessions of Augustine. Augustine of Hippo, most important, the fathers of the Western Church, and one of the most influential figures in the church, regarding his confessions, his personal dark night, and this is next used here to elicit its particular characteristics. Augustine tormented spiritual search. He was famous for all things, no? You know, the history is another one. But afterwards, he was a great saint. He wrote about Trinity than any other in the history of the world, about Trinity. His books are so great, at least Augustine. Augustine is even now, the Catholic theology always depend on Augustine and Aquinas. But I like Augustine more than Aquinas. I studied though Aquinas, but anyway. In his confessions, accounts of feeling his soul broken with pain and of being destroyed, bewildered, and blind were frequent. St. Augustine was torn by doubts regarding God's mercy, by fear of death and of his judgment, finding unbearable the misery of his own soul, and unable to run away from himself. He poured out how he felt trapped, and impotent. In spite of these moments, filled with despair and registration, called by him salutary madness, he seemed to have been able to keep a sense of control over his situation as his suffering had a clear finality. I was dying to live. My dear friends, before I conclude, it is unjust to say, without saying few words about the great Spanish saint John of the Cross. So with that, I will conclude my this evening's talk. The 16th century mystic John of the Cross identified and described the kindred phenomenon, a sort of desolation called dark night of the soul. I made a homily once here in this chapel. You can watch that in internet. That's already there. You can get in our St. Michael's Church about this saint of John of the Cross. I'm not saying great, but at least something is there. Okay. We enter the dark night, said John, as a tortuous but fruitful ascetic path to the mystical goal of union with God. St. John of the Cross was described by Thomas Merton as the greatest of all mystical theologians, and his writing stands at the pinnacle of the Christian mystical tradition. The Dark Night of the Soul, his best known work, is considered a peerless account of spiritual blindness and its eradication by divine grace, and his astute analysis and advice have meaning and usefulness for many who find themselves in an apparent impasse or quandary on path. Deep into the darkness, way beneath our senses, God is instilling another better love and deeper, more urgent longings that empower our willingness for our necessary relinquishments along the way. Joseph mapped spiritual life in terms of 3 stages: purgation, illumination, and union. This is one of the great fathers of the church from Evagrius of Ponticus. He is very credited for all mysticism in the church, even from 4th century, great Saint Evagrius of Ponticus. My dear friends, I conclude with a verse from Thomas Merton, put it well when he said, God, who is everywhere, never leaves us. Yet he seems sometimes to be present, sometimes absent. If we do not know him well, we do not realize that he may be more present to us when he is absent than when he is present. No man is an island, from the book called No Man Is. Thank you for this evening being with me and listening to me. We will see tomorrow. I am going to not that much dark, but something about well and the spring of water. Please come. That's an interesting topic. The Samaritan lady and going to Our Lady Mary, the Mother of God, as the loving, as a well that the spring came to the world. Thank you. Good evening. And